Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Donna Jackson, Director of Membership Development for Project 21 of the National Center for Public Policy Research. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, well, we really enjoyed you at the Freedom Festival. That's like a couple of years ago, and you were awesome. And so I really want to have a conversation with you about how do you see our freedoms being threatened, and particularly with the upcoming election? Why do you think that? I mean, we have a Democrat president in office, and the Democrats say that they're the friends of minorities in America. So we should be reassured, right?
No, I mean, I wish that was the case, but this administration has done everything it could to take away our freedoms. I'm glad that you said that they say they're a friend of minorities, because what they've done, two things. One, they've weaponized minorities against the greater population.
Hmm.
They've somehow told the American people that if you exercise your freedom, that you're actually hurting other groups. You're not. I mean, our Constitution guarantees us freedom. Telling people that words are violence is wrong. Telling people that if you don't be something that you're not, you hear them talk about anti-whiteness, right? And they're saying like, oh, well, if you're not practicing, and it's not good enough for you not to be racist, but you have to be anti-white.
Right.
And you have to practice these principles, that you're somehow hurting America. I hate the fact that they're using Bonnie Willis, they're using Loretta James, Alvin Bragg, they're using Black faces to take away the freedoms of the American people. When they talk about ID cards, and they say somehow that having an ID card, despite the fact that you need an ID card to get a bank, you need to get on a plane, that's somehow suppressing the Black vote. I'll tell you, it's not. I don't know a single person that doesn't have an ID card, but I bring that up to say what they're doing right now with all the law for there is actually what voter suppression really is. They're using people to go after the leading candidate in order for people not to vote for who they want to. They're angry that the populist movement is determining in this country who they want to vote for. And that was what this country was founded on. That we as American citizens can choose who we want to vote for and who we think best represents our values. They're not just going after the ability of people to vote for who they want to with all of these legal battles that they have with the former president. And you're going to tell me right now that somehow all of the decades when President Trump supported the NAACP, he was given awards. He supported the National Action Network, Al Sharpton. He supported the Rainbow Coalition with Jesse Jackson. He gave countless individuals money, loans to start businesses, African Americans. All of a sudden, when he runs for president, he's this great racist. No, he's a businessman, and business people understand that you need more customers and that every person is a potential customer when you're in business. He understands that. He also understands that if the American people have more money, they can spend, they can thrive, they can build strong families economically. So all of a sudden, I'm supposed to believe that a man who gave permanent funding for historically Black colleges, prison reform, record home ownership, record Black entrepreneurship, a man, opportunity zones, a man who actually created a Black community boom financially, where
Right,
the growth in African American communities were higher, is all of a sudden this racist, this white
right.
supremacist. There's no way. And they're also taking away the freedom of religion. They've gone into churches and now they're sitting there and going, if you believe the core principles of our Bible, then you are somehow a racist, that you are somehow a threat to individuals, because now all of a sudden everybody's sin has to be affirmed. And if we don't go along with it and we believe in a certain principle, then somehow we're suppressing someone's freedom. Freedom was never dependent on how I make you feel as a human being. Freedom is the exercise of everybody's ability to be able to determine their own fate, and government should never be the person or the entity that's picking winners and losers. And that's
Well,
what we're seeing today.
well, I mean, they're saying that according to the Museum of African American History at the Smithsonian, they had an exhibit of what it means to be white, and they're saying that working hard, rational thinking, being objective is and believing in the Bible is acting white. And I was thinking, wow, what about all those Black and Asian Christians? I guess they're being told that they're acting white if they believe in biblical values and want to get ahead. That's acting white. That is so insulting.
It actually is. And let's remember our history. Okay. Harriet Tubman said, everything that I do is because what the Lord told me to. He
Right,
talks to me and I talk back to him.
right,
She was guided by her faith. Martin Luther King,
right,
again, decades later, was guided by his faith.
right,
Remember, even the movement to have the slaves freed were
right.
by abolitionists who were guided more by their faith
That's right.
than they were the present conditions in the United States. Civil rights, Civil War soldiers
Right,
died in big numbers,
right.
white Americans,
Yeah,
the freedom of African Americans. Our faith has always been a guiding light. And to say that somehow that Christian values
right,
is acting white is an insult to all of the work that everyone has done to
right.
get us to the point we are today.
No,
And that
that
is,
is absolutely. And the Republican Party was the political party that wanted to ultimately end slavery. But now let me ask you this. I mean, ever since what the Civil Rights Act passed into law, well, led by President Lyndon Baines Johnson, that what there was a shift, right? I mean, African Americans in America started to vote Democrat, right? Since that time, and they they've been pretty strong supporters of the Democrat Party. Why do you think that was, and do you think that's changing?
well, absolutely. Let me start off by saying this. Booker T. Washington believed that it was our hard work, our faith in God,
Right,
that actually was the key to success in this country. He started Tuskegee Institute. The
right,
shift came when LBJ decided that he created this great society. But I think the root came from two professors that said, you know what, we can service more people if we break up, if don't have two parents in the household.
Mm,
So it was not an unintended consequence. It was the goal to destroy Black families.
mm,
The family unit is where faith is born, is where our morals come from. And what they decided to do, it was more important the number of people they serviced than the quality of life those people had.
wow,
So they decided that they were going to vilify and make the father the
right.
enemy of the community and the family.
Mm.
And what came with that is
Do
that
you
the
remember the professor? I'd like to look that up. Do you remember the name of the professors?
I forgot off the tip of my head, but I'll make
Okay.
sure I get that
Okay.
information
Yeah.
back.
All right.
But it's very important that you recognize that when they decided that,
Mm,
then they started discouraging people from having a two-parent household. Before
mm.
that time, African Americans had a higher rate of two-parent households
That's
than even
true.
white Americans.
That's true.
When they made the husband the government, and the government doesn't like to compete with faith, doesn't the government wants to be God, and you can't have two,
Right.
then that's when you see this trend towards socialism. And with socialism came the move towards the Democratic Party. And I think that that's what you saw. When you have the father, and it's very important, the
Right.
father is a shadow of our God and how he treats us. When you take that away, it
Right.
becomes difficult for people to realize. And you have kids that have grown up that they feel like if the person who's supposed to look like me and care about me is not here, then they hate themselves and they hate other people. And
Now,
I think that we need that spiritual leader both in the
right.
Father and in the church.
I mean, it is heartbreaking to see so many young men kind of kind of lost, angry, and they really feel like not wanted, and no one expects them to be responsible, so they get involved in, you know, self-destructive activities or gangs or whatever, and it is really such a negative message, especially towards the young men, that we don't expect you to be responsible, and if there is a pregnancy, we don't expect you to be the father or the husband. The girl, the woman can just get a check from the government.
And that's the most destructive thing. I think that you have to recognize why this push is. You know, I think it's 85 to 90% of all the funds that get allocated to help so-called underserved communities actually goes to administrative cost
Right,
and NGOs. Very little of that money goes into the community. I always say that the poverty industrial complex
right,
is just as strong and lucrative as the military industrial complex, but you
mm,
don't need an act of aggression. So there's a motivation behind why they want to create more poverty. Fathers fight for their families. They want to take care of them. They want to be the guiding light in that household. When you take that out, then all of a sudden you have the government coming in and telling you what you can do. And when they're telling you to hate your father, to hate yourself, then of course that's the product that you have. And then you asked me about the conservative movement. I think that we have to remember our roots and go back to it. A lot of conservatives don't even know their own history about why the Republican Party existed and what they were able to do. The first Black senator was a Republican. The
mm.
first elected officials were a Republican. The Republican Party pretty much started to end slavery, and we don't like to discuss race. We're afraid of it I think in a large part because we think we're afraid of the pushback. I think that we need to go back and revisit and then realize that we have the right policies, we have the right message, and
Right,
that we're not be afraid of being rejected. I think that's and I bring a little bit about my religion in here because I think that was the whole story of Jonah and the whale.
right,
God has people everywhere, but they need to hear from us that we care. And think about this. If you have a group of people who's been abandoned by their fathers, if you don't show up, they don't think you care, even if they're staying with the most abusive parent.
right.
When you show up, you show that you care. It's the reason why the liberals don't care about Black people. I'm gonna tell you that. They don't care. They see them as a vehicle to use for money, for power. But they understand that showing up in a church, tapping your finger and rocking your head, at least signals to the people that they're there and they're present. And we
Right.
have to do the same thing. I think that the reason why you see this big shift towards the conservative movement in this, mostly because of President Trump, is because he's not afraid to go into the community.
Yeah,
He shows up. He's at Chick-fil-A. He's walking up and down the street. He's talking to people. And guess what? They're responding to it. He's saying, I am experiencing, especially with the lawfare that you see being overcharged, being targeted by the Department of Justice unjustly. A
right.
lot of African Americans, they feel like he understands what's happening to them because a lot of them have said that they've experienced that same thing.
Well,
And so
let me just support what you're saying. Let me show a clip from President Donald Trump visiting a bodega in Hamilton Heights. I think that's in I don't know if that's in Harlem or the Bronx. I'm not sure. Let me just show that. Yeah, here we go. Here we go.
Crowds gather in Upper Manhattan as former President Trump visits a bodega at the center of a controversial case. Good evening, everybody. I am.
Okay, well, he looked very confident to me, and it looked like the people were happy to see him. A lot of people were there, right, to welcome him.
yeah, and they were lined up and he was comfortable being around them. I think that's the main thing.
Right,
I think that people are so afraid. We have to not be afraid to approach people because
right,
we make the assumption that they're going to reject us. They really aren't. They're dying and they're looking for answers.
right,
We have the answers. We just need to go and show up and say, I'm not going to just shout this from the wayside.
right,
I'm actually going to come to you and show you. One of the things I like to say is don't lecture down, lecture up. That means raise people up.
right.
Don't tell them just how bad you are. Show them that you have something in you that can be greater than where you are right now.
Right. Well, listen, I would like to ask people if I'd like to ask you to share your story uh, about how how did you get involved in these sort of these public issues? I I I understand that you had a daycare center and you're from West Memphis, Arkansas. Is that right?
Yes, well, you know, I was moving to the Arkansas. There was a long list. I had smaller kids. There was a long waiting list to put your kids in childcare. I mean, you would pretty much have to, the moment you found out you were pregnant, put your name on one of these lists to get your child have a shot of getting your child in one of these centers. So the need was great. And a lot of people had to turn down, good jobs in other places because they couldn't find childcare. So, it was really in my heart to take care of kids and I love kids and the other thing was I thought, you know, a lot of these families probably have come from broken homes. I can have a family style daycare so that they would both have role models as well as have a nice place to live, a nice place to stay. So I did all of this research, you know, I got the Chamber of Commerce information and did all this research about, you know, licensing requirements, did a comparison of multiple states and what the experts said that kids need to thrive, curriculums, equipment, and bought this really, you know, large facility so that with a large lot so that it was in the requirement of what all the experts says and even the state, it actually met the state requirements. But I went, you know, got the contractors, did all the renovations and was down to the last part of filing for my license and then the licensing department said that I needed a permit from my city. Well, should be easy. I've read all the requirements, go to the city planning commission and they say, well, nope, your lot doesn't fit the requirements. And I'm like, well, what? I mean, all the states is in line with all the states, all the experts of what kids need to thrive. And so they said, well, you know, you can apply for the petition, but we'll see what happens. And I went and they turned me down. And so what's my next step? And they said, you know, you have a public hearing, special ordinance, and you know, maybe you can bypass that. So went through all of the paperwork for that. You know, this is a long process and had the hearings. Of course, I started getting harassed, not really realizing that, you know, that's why I was getting harassed. But anyway, went through
So
the petition.
who was harassing
City
you?
officials coming in, you know, they're looking at the construction, you know, which I, you know, had, you know, reputable contractors, following all the rules. And so I go through all that public hearing, they turn me down. What's the next step? Well, you can go through the city council, you got to get so many council members to vote for you and against you. Well, in the meantime, they're following me around town.
Okay.
The police is following me around town. They illegally search my house with my kids in there. They're screaming, they're crying, you know, and it was going through closets. I don't know what they thought they were going to find, you know. So I wasn't surprised when Mar-a-Lago happened because it's really a shocker when people are going through your personal items and going through your home and kids are crying. And then I'm like, what in the world? I go to the mayor's office. I don't get I don't like cow down and back down. I go to the mayor's office and I demand a public apology. And and I heard more than ever, you're not from around here. And I couldn't figure out why do people keep saying I'm not from around here. And apparently I didn't know how things work. But I had countless members in the community who had previously either owned businesses or tried to own business that told me, you know, that they had experienced the same situation, but most of them gave up and I was in the paper on a weekly basis. They even took me to jail one time because they said, you know, they had the description of somebody that fit
Okay.
fit my description that committed a crime in St. Louis, but I was in West.
Oh my
Right.
God.
And my family didn't know I was in jail until somebody at the church called them and told them, like, we saw, they didn't know where I was. We saw them pick her up. But anyway, I went through all of that, was in the paper every day. And then but I didn't give up. The city council split, the mayor decided against me. And I didn't get my license. I thought, what did I do wrong, Lord? And I started going over again. Well, anyway, long story short, I went up to the state licensing bureau, went to the governor's office, demanded, you know, who am I gonna sue, you or them? and they went down, had a meeting with the mayor, overrode the city, and gave me my license.
Okay.
And so it takes some, but I realized from that even if you don't think that these regulations control your life, they really do. The liberals create regulations to create barriers so they can pick winners and losers.
Mm,
They'll create a regulation to put you out of business if you already have a successful business. They'll
wow.
create a barrier to stop you from going into business if you want to start up a company. That's what's going on right now. My story isn't unusual. I have a truck driver who's one of my members who actually had a successful trucking company where he employed people in the community in
Right.
Los Angeles. African American, had some 14, I think it was about 14 trucks, had different individuals in the community. He employed, people were able to buy homes, start families, be productive in their community. They came in, used the Clean Air Act, put him out of business. All of his trucks were confiscated. They claimed they were going to destroy it. Actually, they didn't, because he said he looked on the internet one day and saw one of his trucks driven in the Philippines, still with a sticker on the top. Those men who wanted to be family, wanted to be good fathers, good
Right.
husbands, bought homes. Some of them, he watched them. Some of them died early. Some
Mm,
of them became homeless,
wow.
became hopeless. This is the thing. They
Wow.
use barriers and regulations to stop people from thriving. Even if you don't want to get involved
Right.
in what's going on in our government, you have to.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, they're going to get involved in your life, whether you get involved or not.
Mhm.
It's important. The government was not designed for us to be a servant to it. The
Right.
government is supposed to be a service to us.
Right.
They're supposed to make sure that we, as American citizens, can thrive and pursue our happiness. They're not supposed to determine what your happiness is. And that's what they're doing with these attacks on freedom. All of a sudden, you can't say, Christ is king, or you're creating violence.
Right.
All of a sudden, you have to affirm someone else's uh, identity so that they can feel good about themselves. There's attacks
Mm,
on men who don't want to be in a same-sex relationship, because somehow if you reject them, then you're creating violence. How are you sitting there and saying
wow.
that
That's
if you're white and you just came to this country and you've never owned a slave and you don't know any slave owners and you're free, but somehow you're oppressing me as an individual
right.
when I have the same ability and access that you have? How about I work hard? How is working hard to earn what you get
Mm,
somehow an oppression? Is not. Booker T. Washington said, work hard,
yeah.
contribute to society. And that makes it, he was a slave.
That's right.
Today, people who have never been slaves have less drive than the actual slaves who all said, okay, now that we're free, we have the opportunity to be producers. Take advantage.
Yeah.
We're not doing that and encouraging people to do that today. And that's awful.
Yeah. No, it is really horrible. I mean, look what happened in California. They passed a $20 minimum wage law, and a lot of restaurants in California are firing their employees and putting in like kiosks, like a computer so you order from a computer instead of from a human being, and they're firing delivery drivers for food because they just can't make it work, and it is insane.
I mean, I know that people don't pay attention to this or probably don't even do the research, but the minimum wage wasn't started so that people could have a nice level of living. It was actually started to force people out of business, just like it is force employees out of jobs.
Wow.
African Americans, there was a large group of African Americans that were employed probably at a greater rate than white Americans.
Right.
They came up with unions, they
Right.
came up with minimum wage to actually stop people from having jobs.
Wow.
Because if I force a minimum wage that's higher than my ability to make a profit, then I have to let people go. The
Right.
other thing is, who is really suffering with the increased minimum wage? It's really the small business owner.
Right.
Larger corporations can absorb the cost.
Right.
Profit margins in small businesses is already thin. It's
Right.
already very thin. They
Right.
don't have a lot of cash on hand. So of course, the independent gas station owner, the independent franchise owner, the
Right.
independent store are the people that are going to be forced out of business.
Right.
And that's the tragedy. It's almost as if, and I don't want to say I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I see a pattern. If I force all the small business owners out of business, then I'm left with only a few larger corporations. And those few CEOs are easier to control than the thousands of
Right.
small business owners.
Well,
The
look what
best
happened with the COVID lockdowns. The big restaurant chains, that they were allowed to stay open, but the small restaurants, they all had to shut down. It was insane.
Yeah, and believe the small businesses are the largest employers
Right.
in this country. It's not the larger corporations, it's the small businesses.
Right.
And they're the ones that offer the most jobs. But it seems like what they're trying to do is force everybody into unemployment, into a universal basic income,
Right.
where they give you a small stipend, which is always going to be less than what you can do as a person, and then lower everybody's standard of living.
Yeah.
Because the real tragedy is that they just don't like people. And they
Well,
feel like they're in the way. We have too many people, they feel like. And they want to really depopulate the earth.
that is scary, and it's almost like we're living inside a science fiction novel, but but unfortunately, it's not science fiction, it's real. Listen, let me show people your website, because I think people would really should come visit that. Let me just share the screen here. Here we go. Okay, so this is the National Center for Public Policy Research, nationalcenter.org/Project 21, Project 20 Black Leadership Network, and you have all these great um, videos and reports. There's you talking about the electric vehicle agenda and all these different issues. And then you have these publications too, which Blueprint for a Better Deal for Black America, what immigration policy means for Black America, and what election reform means for Black America, all these great reports as well. So thank you for coming on the show. Are there any final words that you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this. The narrative that you hear from most Black Americans on the mainstream left liberal media is not what's the feeling in the communities. We really want safe communities. We believe in ID cards. We believe in a better America for everyone. We just want the opportunity that everyone else has. And people love their families, and we love this country, and I don't want people to think it's any different.
Wow. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Really enjoyed speaking with you, and God bless you and your family and your work.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Glad to be back.
All right. God bless.